All right. J. Edwards Holt, writer, poet, among other things, with interests in fiction, fantasy, and science fiction. What are you mostly writing currently?
Currently, fantasy, mostly fantasy.
Is that I was looking at your children's books and then some of your other things. Is the children's books, are they set in the same world that you built for the fantasy things?
They are.
How do you go about doing your world building?
Um, I just kind of try to make everything be connected and a lot of descriptions of different worlds and characters and landscapes. And, occasionally a familiar character will pop up in a book or a familiar location. Um, some are very closely connected, like a series, while others are just kind of loosely connected by being in the same world.
How do you know when you're dealing with a children's book character versus a regular book character?
Well, it's, the themes, you deal with, I guess, more serious themes in the young adult books than you would in the children's books.
Do you have a time when you're writing an regular book and then you're like, this would be a good children's book character? And do they cross over, or have you ever had
Um,
them cross over?
yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. The children's book that I've written, um, the Jealous Little Ogre, it's actually um, the character that's a child ogre in it is actually featured in the Barren World series as an adult, and he has a big part to play in that trilogy.
What areas, or what like physical locations do you write in?
You mean like in my home and stuff?
Yep. Like what's your
Yeah.
writing setup?
Just typically I write around home, or maybe outside when the weather's nice. Might go outside a little bit and enjoy the sunshine. But usually just around the house, in the kitchen or the dining room or living room.
Do you have time set aside that you write every day, or just when you can?
Just when I can, yeah. Just usually it'll be midday is probably the most popular time for me. It just depends on what time of day I feel like getting into it.
What do you have a way that you get into writing? Like what sparks that fuel for creativity?
It could be anything. It could be a song that comes on the radio, or a TV show I watched, or just um, anything really. It just depends. You never really know for sure when the creative sparks are going to show up.
Where do you have anything? So music then is what you would do to try to get into that mindset of writing, or do you have any other time where you're like, this is my moment today, I have to write, and now I need to show up to write? Do you prepare for it anyway, or just sit down and start doing it?
Pretty much just sit down and start doing it. When the idea comes to me, I'll definitely take some notes and make sure I write it down so that I don't forget it. Because if I don't write it down, I'll usually forget it, um, among other things going on. So I usually write it down as soon as possible.
What kind of writing programs do you use? Do you pen and paper, or are you doing different programs?
No, I use I take notes on my phone, and then I use Microsoft Word for all my editing and drafting and all that stuff.
When you I oftentimes have trouble when I get so many notes on my phone. It's hard to face them, to be able to, to be able to use all those thoughts you had. How do you organize those? Do you have that issue where you end up with, if you printed it out, it would be 20 pages from your notes on your phone?
Yeah, sometimes I try to keep them organized, and try to. I'll usually, when I'm done with one, I'll delete it so it won't pile up in there. I try to give the attention to one, at a time, so I can focus on it that way and go ahead and get them knocked out, basically.
Okay. Any particular way where you help organize yourself with that?
Um, just giving them, each different set of notes has a name, and everything is specified, and I try to keep it organized so that I can know exactly where to go to work on this project or work on that project.
Do you use writing groups, or have you been to a writing group before? What's your experience with that?
I haven't been to any writing groups. I belong to some on various social media things, but I've never actually been to any kind of writing meeting or anything like that.
How did you get into writing books then?
Um, it all started when I was in elementary school. I loved, movies and books and everything, and I always wanted to make stories of my own. And so I started writing a lot then, kind of drawing comic books, and um, I really enjoyed writing, and so I kept it up and did a little bit through high school, and then after that, I kind of just put it on the back burner for a while. And back in, I believe it was 2016, I decided to try it again because I hadn't tried it in so long, and I came up with the idea for my first book, and you know, it took me about a year or so, and I went ahead and put that together, and went ahead and published it. And I was surprised with the outcome. The warm reception that it received, and that just encouraged me to keep on doing it and writing more.
When you were writing those comic books growing up, were they like you just take a normal piece of paper, draw out your pictures and your blocks, and then staple them together, that type of comic book, or were you doing
Yeah,
more
mhm.
printing than that?
Yeah, I would draw them, staple them together. Uh, Sometimes I would make copies and sell them to my friends for like a quarter a piece.
Nice.
Yeah.
Enterprising.
Yeah.
When you did your first publishing, what was that experience like?
It was definitely a learning experience. I've learned a lot since then, and I feel like I'm still learning too. Um, because I basically went into it knowing nothing about publishing. So I had to watch a lot of tutorials and talk to a lot of people and just kind of learn a few things the hard way, and um, basically learn that way.
Did you do like a self-publishing or a publishing house? How did you do that first one?
The first one, I was originally going through one of those companies that is pay to publish,
Mhm.
but it didn't work out very well because as soon as I made the payments, they kind of disappeared, and then I've heard that they went out of business or something, and so a lot of us were just left hanging. Um, but then I heard about Amazon's self-publishing stuff, and did some research on that, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah, I really like Amazon's. I had the same experience with my first one in 2012, 2014 timeframe. I think I started it in 2012 and then published in 2014. And it was through one of those self-publishing houses.
Hmm.
And it didn't go out of business when I was doing it, but it definitely was. You could tell that they were there to make money off the writer more than making money off of the books the writers
Yeah,
wrote. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was disappointing, but it
yeah.
was also good to learn. I haven't
Hmm.
had the experience with working with a big publisher, and I'm not sure I would do that now. I don't have to worry about making that decision because I don't have the offers, but I'm not sure I would do it because you lose so many of the rights to your book. That
Hmm.
would worry me. I'd have to look at a contract on that, but I do
Yeah.
like Amazon just for the ease of it and being
Mhm.
able to get the soft cover, the Kindle, and then also I think they have hardcover now, although I haven't published any with hardcover on Amazon.
Me neither. And they got the stuff through Audible too that you can get
Mm.
the audiobook done. That's a great process
Have
as
you done
well.
those?
I have, yeah. I've almost all of mine have audiobooks now.
Do you read those yourself, or do you? I don't know how Audible works.
No, I get narrators. What you do is you can post your title and with an audition script, and people will audition, and you choose the narrator that you want.
Do you use the same one for all of them, or
No,
same
it's
one for
it's
specific genres?
I there was one that I used for my trilogy, and then for every other book though, it's been somewhat different.
Okay. The children's books on there too?
Yeah, the Jealous Little Ogre. Uh huh.
Okay.
It
Is
is.
that I've looked at your website. Is that the only children's book you have, or do you have other ones as well?
Yeah, that's the only one that's it's a kind of a preschool type of book. The rest of them are, you know, I guess preteen to young adult to older adult type of books.
Yeah. It gets weird when you start talking about writing and you say, well, this is an adult book, but then that's not really what you mean.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not the triple X book. It's just a book written for adults. So
yeah. It's most of them. They're kind of adult books in the way that that young adult and the way that The Hobbit or Harry Potter or something like that. Anybody, I would say probably 12 and older would enjoy them.
do you have plans to do other children's books?
As of right now, I don't know. Most everything I got planned is in the young adult category.
When you did your illustrations for books, do you do those yourself or people you know, or do you use any programs to do them?
No, I connected with an artist online, a freelance artist that did it for me.
Okay.
Mhm.
Do you use the same artist for all of them or different?
No, it's been several different artists.
What was your experience like with the children's book one of doing the
Mhm.
the
Yeah, it was
illustration for that?
pretty much what I did was, of course, I wrote the words for the book first, and then I came up with, a description of what I wanted for each page, and I sent that to the person. I said, "Is this something you think you can do?" And they would do the pages, send me one page at a time, and I would, either approve it or say, "Okay, this needs a little bit of work," and basically like that, just kind of in that way. And the
Have you
same with
ever
the
thought?
comic book I did. It was the same process.
Okay. Have you ever thought about using AI, or maybe not AI, but just a program to do the drawings for it?
Um, well, the only thing with the illustrations with the AI is that it can't really repeat the same thing like for a children's book or something like that. And it just I, I guess nothing beats the human touch for stuff like that.
Hmm. What do you mean it doesn't repeat for the AI?
Um, it can these art generators can generate like a painting or something like that, but I'm not sure how they would do in drawing the same character in a different situation or something like that, in the
Oh.
way that a person can. Yeah.
Hmm. Do you make suggestions for the illustrator, or do you just see what they do and then if you were wanting something different, ask them for something different?
Yeah, I typically give them, just kind of try to, paint the picture in their mind as best as I can. And, they'll give me an example and I'll either say that's great or, okay, this is actually how I was picturing it or something like that.
When you're writing in general, how do you keep the story straight in your mind? Do you write just straight through linear, or do you jump around from your scenes?
Typically I go through linear, but there have been, some books that I've done where I kind of got stuck a little bit in one spot. So I went ahead and just kind of um, went ahead and wrote what I knew I wanted to write in the later parts of the book, and just kind of gave myself time to cool off a little bit and come back and do the other part after I uh, thought about it more.
when you're putting the trilogy together, did you have it all written before you published the first one, or did you have like an idea of what was going to happen, or did you just do the first book, get it out there, and then work on the second? What was your?
I definitely had an idea of what was going to happen. I didn't have them all written. I started with, just the first one, and I was thinking a lot about the second and the third one, and planning accordingly to what I had planned for those. And some stuff, it did change along the way, um, you know, in ways that I thought made it better and more original and stuff like that. But um, essentially, yeah, I had a plan for it, but I didn't have them all written at the same time.
Do you have a theme that kind of joins all your writing together, or that whether you're conscious of it or not, just thinking about it now, if not, that runs through all of your books, a theme that you deal with?
Yeah, it's I try to put Christian messages in the books, messages about spirituality and stuff, and just general themes of love and family, acceptance, and good versus evil, things like that.
What's your beginnings of when you started writing poetry?
Um, I was a little bit later getting to the poetry game. I think it was in college that I probably, tried to write my first poem. Uh, and I just, I fell in love with it, just being able to tell a story through poetry, through the rhyming words, or um, through the ones that don't rhyme. Um, and I just kind of developed a love for it.
Do you think that the creativity of poetry versus regular prose writing are from different places? Like, do you think that originates somewhere else?
Um, I guess it all comes from the same kind of, creative mind thing. I guess it could be, poetry sometimes may have a little more emotion and passion in it, I think.
How do you, oftentimes I'll have, if I'm taking a note about something, like I'll have an idea just out in the world, and then I'll write the phrase or idea down in the notes on the phone. And then I come later back to it, and I still understand when sometimes you get the strong meaning, like when it hits you and you write it down and you're like, yeah, that's what that means for sure. And then you come back later and you can still, even if it's weeks or months later, you come back to that line, you can remember that whole thought when you thought about it, that it's still right there. So
Mhm.
I also have the times where I'd write something down and then I'd come back to it, and I understand what I meant when I first wrote it down, but then I also see a different meaning for it or a different perspective of it, whether that happens from just life. You've changed in the amount of time you've taken that note, whether it's been hours or longer. But
Mhm.
do you have that same feeling with poetry versus regular writing? Because I can often write a line, like a character from a book, working on some sort of sci-fi thing, and then I'll write down a line. I go, that sounds like this character. I have to find a place for that and build that scene later. And then it turns out it wasn't a line from that character. It was a line for some poetry. And I have that go back and forth sometimes. How do you, have you had that happen, and how do you keep that straight if it does happen?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, um, I've written stuff for sure that you know later I'll go back and look at it and say, this isn't what I want, and I have to change it a little bit. Um, I've come up with just poem ideas or story ideas from just a title I had in my head, something like that. Yeah.
Hmm. I envision, when I think about poetry, I have two different places where I think about, like, visualize where it comes from. One is the idea that there's the poetry you write yourself, and it's manifest through your life experience and perspectives. And then the other is where you're the antenna or the conduit for some other place that poetry resides, and then it comes from, and you're just you're writing it down. Maybe you change it a little, but oftentimes you could not understand what it means, or you have this specific thought that you're thinking about when you're writing it. And I visualize it as this, not a dark like midnight forest, but a dark forest that is separating the two realities of our reality and somewhere else. And those messages are passing through that. Like if I'm thinking about poetry and I want to go to the place where I'll write poetry, then
Mhm.
I think about that connection in my mind, and that usually helps. The other is I think about it as a river, and it's this river of ideas, and you can go to it and dip your bucket in and pull out some ideas and see what you have, or use your hand or whatever. And I like visualizing poetry that way more than I do regular writing. But I oftentimes, if you're just writing regular books, that
Mhm.
it feels like the scene is writing itself, whether it's the two characters are talking, two or more characters, and it's just, it's working out, and you're like, wow, you're a spectator, and you're just trying to
Mhm.
get it down fast enough. But more often with poetry, I feel that way, where it's like it's coming from somewhere else. Like I could write poetry myself. It just doesn't seem like it has that certain something that it does when you're connected to whatever other more ethereal ideas.
Mhm.
Do you see writing books and poetry as different than that? And could you attribute that to why poetry came to you later on in life?
Yeah, possibly so. Yeah. I like the idea of the different metaphors there. Um, yeah, for sure. I think you know, um, I guess I read a lot more poetry later on than I did early on, so that's probably a little bit why it came a little bit later. Um, but yeah, I know what you mean about sometimes you feel like you're just writing what you're meant to write. You're just kind of a conduit, I guess, for the writing. I've felt that plenty of times as well.
I know you're ordained, correct?
Uh huh.
Do you see any connections, or like I was a minor in religion at a Catholic school in Florida, but I didn't go through the whole thing of getting ordained. But I've written sermons before, and certainly done that in churches. Have you written sermons?
I have not. I have not.
No.
I have not.
Have you spoken in church or anything?
Yes, I have done that. Uh huh.
Okay. Well, that's along the same lines. When you prepare for that, do you is that different than how you prepare for either writing poetry or fantasy fiction?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say yeah, because that it definitely feels like that comes from more of a spiritual perspective and biblical. But sometimes the other writing feels like it comes from a similar place as well.
Yeah. I think that's what kind of gives me the little more comfort or insight into whether this reality is everything or if there's other things. So you have that religious angle that says, of course, there's more. And
Hmm.
then you have, if you're not looking at the religious idea, although I would probably find that hard to separate, that there are other things happening. There is more to life after this. And I wonder how much, because it seems to me that poetry has that lyricism and emotion in it more. maybe it's more compact than regular writing, or maybe if I'm writing fiction, I'm just writing more storytelling, and poetry is more feeling, that it taps into that other place more than here.
Hmm. I think so for sure.
Do you have a, back in the day, people used to say you have this calm place where you can go in your mind to visualize a place where if you're going through stressful times, where you can just get a little relaxation from it or a little respite from it at that moment. Like go to your, maybe these days they'd call it a safe space, although that's a different thing, I think. But just a calm place in your mind if you're trying to quiet your mind. Do you have a place like that you've had, whether you've been there or used that recently, or if you've ever have anything like that?
Yeah, I like to, visualize like a beach landscape, palm trees and sunshine, things like that. That definitely calms me, thinking about that kind of environment.
Is that a place you've been to before, or just a place your
Um,
mind is?
I've been similar places, but probably never one the way I've imagined it. Yeah.
Hmm. When you're writing poetry, do you think about the senses, or do you try to incorporate that? Or when you're working maybe as the conduit writing anything, are you kind of transported or trying to reach out to a place like that, beach, where you're using the visuals to paint the picture and tell the story, where you're trying to get into the other senses too, whether it's the smell of it, the feel of it, the temperature, anything like that?
Yeah, definitely when I'm, writing stories, especially, I try to put myself in the character's shoes and try to, think about, what they're seeing at this time, what they're feeling, maybe what they're smelling or hearing, things like that, so that I can kind of sort of become the character for a little bit in order to properly write them.
Hmm. How do you do your character development other than that?
Um, just different character arcs, trying to, you have to take a character from point A to point B and, um, explain the journey in between, um, you to kind of develop them in that way.
Have you ever visualized your storyline? Where the time that I've done it the most is when I was working on this novel that I'm still not finished. It's one of those things that I keep coming back to because I'm just not able to write it yet. I don't think I have enough experience writing, or there's something that is missing when I write it. I have certain parts of it done, but it's trying to intertwine two stories or two
Mhm.
timelines at once. And you have it's not quite like The Princess Bride, where you have Fred Savage getting read to by Columbo. Are you familiar with this movie?
Mhm.
Okay. If not, you should definitely watch The Princess Bride. So you have him in present time, and then Columbo is reading the this book to him, and then that's the separate story. Mine's not exactly like that. Although after I realized that, I was like, oh man, is this did I start doing it like this because of The Princess Bride? So that worried me a little. I didn't want to copy anything. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, when I'm thinking about those two storylines, I try to separate it as in having a story going with its own arcs and all, and then this other story going with its own arcs, and then where they overlap together, instead of just saying telling one story and then telling another story in two separate books, or in one book just one at a time, trying to mix them together. And I guess that's a lot like if you have a story going and you have two characters or more that are going through things, and you're just going back and forth between scenes.
Mhm.
Do you ever visualize how your stories are connecting, or more or less the story arcs, and try to line up the visuals of this character? You're trying to go from this point to this point, and they're trying to learn this thing or deal with this thing, and this other character is doing the same thing, and then you end up with more of a visual of that, or is it all words?
There's definitely the visual element, yeah, that I try to paint the picture of, to showcase the character's journey from this to that, and just show how they've changed so that that they may become essentially a new character, just based on the changes that they've made and the things that they've learned. But yeah, definitely, there's some visual representation in there.
How do you think that your religious interactions affect your writing, or maybe not affect, but are
Mhm.
present in your writing?
I think it gives it more purpose, just incorporating the faith-based beliefs in there. It gives it more purpose, a reason to uh, to start doing it and a reason to keep doing it.
Would you say that your writing is along the lines of like a C.S. Lewis type, where you're doing the religious undertones and everything, or is it just something that is going on, and it might a reader might not be able to pick up on?
Yeah, it's definitely, I definitely try to model myself by C.S. Lewis. Some of the things might be a little more subtle than that. It just depends. But definitely, he's someone that I've tried to model myself by.
Have you done recent comic books in your writing? If you have the novel writing and then children's books and poetry, have you published a comic book?
I did, yeah. A few years back, I published a comic book that's connected to my other stories.
Is that a one-time thing, or like a were you like testing
Yeah,
the waters of it, or are you going to do a
testing
series?
the waters. Yeah, it's probably a one-time thing. It was kind of complicated. Just it was, uh, a whole lot more work than the other things. I may eventually do another comic book down the road, but I'm just trying to really, focus on novels for now.
How do you pick out what next story you're going to work on?
Really, I just kind of I've got a list of stories and story ideas that um, that I want to write, and some drafts that I've already written, and I just kind of go through and pick, which one I feel like working on next, and um, you know don't want to release something that's too much like the last one, or something like that. So I try to kind of split them up a little bit in that way.
What do you have? What are you working on, or what's coming out next?
Right now, I'm working on my mythology book. It's basically just it's kind of like a guidebook. It's going to have pictures in it it's going to be like a guide to all the different types of creatures and worlds and the mythology that take place in my fictional universe, The Seven Branches. And it's going to have, the pictures and stuff in it. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm little over halfway through with that. So I'm hoping to release that in the next few months or so.
Is that going to be laid out like an explanation of this character and that character, or is it a story book?
Yeah, it's more like an encyclopedia type of thing.
Okay.
Just uh, like a picture and then a description of the type of character or the location or something like that. There
Okay.
will be some smaller stories weaved in there, though, for the mythology. Um, Smaller stories that I'd like to, write books on later. Um, but for now, they'd just be smaller stories contained within the mythology.
Is that mythology a thing you've created, or is it modeled after Greek or Roman mythology?
It is something I've created. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. What's the best way for people to follow your writing and be able to get your books?
Most of my books are available on Amazon. Of course, they can learn more about me at my website, which is jedwardsholt.com. And for all the social media platforms, they can find me at J. Edwards Holt.
Okay. Do you have your Amazon authors page going?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. That's always a good way, I think, for people to be able to see what's coming out next just when they sign up to follow that. And then they can
Yeah.
see what comes out. And then I do like the authors page on that where you have all the books there at once and you go into like your own little store.
Hmm. Yep. That's a great tool.
Any thoughts or ideas you wanted to cover that we didn't cover?
Um, I don't think so. I think we talked about most of it.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time coming on today, and all of the links I have for you, some of your social media, and then your website will be in the show notes for anybody that wants to see them, and
Okay.
they'll be able to go directly to that. I think I'll try to get your Amazon one too, your Amazon authors page. Usually that's a really long link, but I think there's a way to do a shorter one. I have to figure that out.
Okay. Do you want me to send that to you or?
If you have a shorter link for it, you can. Yeah, that'd be
Okay,
good.
I'll check. I'm not sure if I do, but I'll
All
check
right.
and see what it shows on there.
All right. I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you after this.
All right. Thank you for having me.